A very good day I bid to our lovely lecturers. My name is Brenda, and today our group, which consists of me, Jessica, and Angeline, will present on Task 2, which is the multimodal presentation. So this is the NPDL of 3 different subjects, as we can see on the screen. And our presentation would consist of 3 different parts, of which the first would be multicultural elements. So in this case, we will be talking about the multicultural elements that we found in the short film Haikal. As we can see on the screen, I've listed out a table of contents, of which is the general overview of what is to be presented in my slides later on. Let's start by stating out the multicultural elements that we found and we wanted to highlight from the short film Haikal. So we as a group, we have decided that we wanted to highlight social issues. So what is social issues? Social issues are problems that influence individuals of a society. It can be generated from multiple aspects, for example, a society's approach, perception, or norm towards certain stuff. And it may generate some social issues which may be present in certain communities, but not in certain communities. So it all depends on the situation. Now, from the social issues that we found in the short film, we have decided to break it down to 3 different main points that we wanted to highlight. First would be racism, which is discrimination towards individuals on the basis of their ethnic group. Second would be peer pressure, the influence on people by peers. And last but not least is biracial identity crisis, which is the racial identification issues. Let's start off by stating out the racism part that we found in the film itself. So the main lead in the film is a Chinese Malay boy named Haikal. He was discriminated for his mixed background, so people emphasized on certain issues. People made assumptions on him on the basis of his ethnic roots. So neither his Chinese nor Malay classmates actually embraced his background. They made certain comments on him based on his ethnic roots. So because of that, he was labeled as weird because of his ethnic background, and also called a banana for not being able to be proficient in Malay and Chinese despite his ethnic background. So they actually made an assumption that just because he was Malay and Chinese, he had to be proficient in both languages, which is not the case in real life and also in the film, because our language abilities is not determined by our ethnic background. Even his teacher in the film labeled Haikal as different, and he justified that his ethnic background, his difference, the fact that he was different was the reason that he couldn't make friends. And that is a statement that is morally incorrect, because as an educator, one should not be emphasizing on one's ethnic background as the reason for not being able to make friends at school. Next would be peer pressure. Now in the film itself, it can be seen that Haikal really wanted to make friends with his classmates. So in the process of trying to become friends with his classmates, he tried to change himself accordingly when he is with different classmates. For instance, when he is with his Malay classmates, he tried to fit in as a Malay boy by trying to converse in the Malay language despite not being proficient in a certain language. So when talking to his ethnic Chinese classmate, he tried to emphasize that he was half Chinese through his mother and talk about the Chinese food that his mother made for him. And he tried to fit in, but the fact that he was not able to converse in fluent Mandarin led to him being called a banana. And this led to him feeling the need to ask his parents to learn Chinese and to give him lessons in order for him to be fluent in the language. He had hoped that had he become fluent in the language, his classmates would eventually accept him as their own and become friends with him. Last but not least would be the biracial identity crisis. As you can see at the start of the film, Haikal proudly self-identified as a Malay Chinese boy, but due to different circumstances that he had to face, unfortunately, He was put in a situation where people doubted him, and he himself soon questioned about his own understanding towards his own heritage. And he attempted to change himself, as I've said before, in terms of trying to fit in with different groups of people. So in that case, he had a particularly hard time trying to self-identify with either being Chinese or Malay because he felt like he had to identify with either one. And now for the conclusion, our group has decided that the multicultural element, which is the social issues, reflects not only the short story itself but also what some communities in real life may face. So in this particular story, it serves as the backbone to the plot. Here's some screenshots from the film Haikal, and that is all from me. Thank you.
Say hi to all of my lecturers. I'm Jessica, and today I'm going to be presenting about the multiple perspectives of a current issue highlighted in the short film Haikal. From this short film, we can see that the main issue highlighted is regarding to the cultural issues which relates to the struggles of a mixed-race Malaysian in a society. As we all know, Malaysia is a multi-diverse country and we are all shaped by different characteristics which makes us unique in our own way. However, in this short film, we can see that the main character was struggling as he did not categorize himself in one specific group. Now, the first perspective that we will be looking at is the main character Haikal. From his point of view, he wondered why he should be treated differently because of his race. He is a mixture of both Chinese and Malay, and he didn't think that it could be a big problem until he went to school, where he was having a hard time to make friends with other people. Other than that, he also thinks that he shouldn't be eating Chinese food to be a Malay, and he thinks that he should learn Mandarin to be a Chinese. This is because of the scenes where he was trying to make friends with Malay students in his class by offering them his Chinese food, but they wouldn't want to accept it because they think that it is not halal. And when he was trying to talk and introduce himself to the Chinese friends, they were thinking that he was weird because he could not speak Mandarin at all when he is a part of Chinese. The second character that we will be looking at is the mother, and this is one of the characters that show positive role where she thinks that it is not always a bad thing to be different. From her point of view, she thinks that Haikal doesn't have to be different and he gets to keep both of his race. She thinks that both cultures is what make Haikal Haikal. So Haikal doesn't have to choose to either one to represent himself when he is a part of both. And the mother also thinks that educators should be the one to educate the students about accepting rather than discriminating one another. She thinks that the teacher in this short film didn't play a good role of trying to teach and educate the students to accept differences, and she thinks that the educator didn't do a great job in delivering his role. Next, we will be looking at the side characters, and the first side character that we'll be look at is the father. And from his point of view, it is okay for Haikal to take time and learn the culture. And it is also hard, but he believes that Haikal can achieve it eventually. Now, why does he say this is because that both he and his wife did struggle to understand one another's culture before they got married, and eventually they had the mutual understanding and they find a point where they can tolerate with one another's culture by trying to adapt them into their daily life. And they think that if Haikal try to learn, and he can succeed as well, because if they can do it, he can too. And it is okay for him to take time and learn the culture. He doesn't have to rush into it, and he can just take it one step at a time. Last but not least, he also thinks that Haikal can help other people to understand him better. This is because if the people around him doesn't want to try or make the effort to understand Haikal, then maybe Haikal should be the one to share informations about the cultures and the lifestyle that he applies in his life. We will also be looking at the point of view of the teacher in this short film, where he thinks that Haikal shouldn't be with people that he could not fit into. This is proven from the scene where when Haikal was struggling to make friends or to play with the friends, the teacher was trying to ask Haikal what was the problem. But after Haikal explained, he didn't make the effort to try to make the students to get along, but instead he punished them for being loud, and he told Haikal to just be by his own and do his own thing. Other than that, he also thinks that Haikal is different because he could not categorize himself in a specific race, and Haikal should choose only one race to represent himself. Now, why this is because he is trying to play his role as a government servant, where whenever you want to fill up a government form, you need to specifically state what race you are in, and you cannot choose more than one, such as Haikal, who did chose both Malay and Chinese. And he thinks that it is weird that Haikal's parents didn't teach him the right way to fill up the form. The last two side characters that we will be looking at is the Chinese students. Now, from their perspectives, their parents had taught them that Chinese people who can't speak Mandarin is a banana, and because they are different outside, and they shouldn't be friends with Chinese that doesn't know how to speak Mandarin. Why? Because they think that Chinese that doesn't learn their own root or their own language are someone who forget about their own culture, such as Haikal, who doesn't know how to speak in Mandarin and only mainly speaks in English. So they think that they shouldn't be mixing themselves with people like this because they could not communicate well, or it is an insult for them for Chinese who doesn't know how to speak Mandarin that tries to make friends with them. So last but not least, we are going to be looking at the Malay students' perspective. Now, from their point of view, they question the food that Haikal ate because it's a Chinese food. They didn't know that there are halal Chinese food for them to eat. When Haikal offered them the Chinese food, the halal Chinese food, they didn't want to accept because they were questioning about it, and they think that maybe Haikal didn't know that it is non-halal just because it is a Chinese food. And other than that, they also think that it is weird that a Malay only speaks English and not Malay, and speaking English is only for Americans. Now, this is something that we should look in both sides. Which the first side, we can see that the Malay students were trying to say that people who speaks in English is only for Americans because we should be talking our own language. We should be speaking our own language as it is our own culture, and we should not be trying to learn other people's language because it is not a part of our country. And The other side is learning other language is also a good thing because it is taken as a skill that could benefit us in the future. For example, if Haikal has the skill, in the future he may be able to communicate with people from other countries, as English is one of is a lingua franca. Yeah. So from this short film, the conclusion that I can make is that we should embrace the uniqueness of the cultures in our country, and we should accept people from all culture and differences. So rather than trying to be trying to discriminate people from other races, we should be accepting, and we should embrace it as our uniqueness, and we should not be ashamed of it. Last but not least, we should also educate one another to understand each other better. How we can do this is that we should be spreading information, or we should teach other people how our culture is, and maybe try to exchange information from them as well. If we don't know something about their culture, maybe we should ask rather than making our own assumption. And from this, we can also learn the various cultures in our country and to know everything about our own country. That's all from me. Thank you.
Good day, IBIT, to all my lecturers. My name is Angeline Anghua, and I will be presenting the third part of this presentation, which is the analysis of English morphology and syntax in the short film Haikal. To start off, I will be discussing morphology. Morphology is the study of word forms, and this refers to the internal structure of words and also the rules applied in word formation. In morphology, the smallest units which carries meaning are called morphemes. In morphemes, it can be divided into two types, which is free morphemes and bound morphemes. Free morphemes are independent, which means they can stand on their own, and it can be categorized into two, which is lexical and functional. Whereas bound morphemes, it must be attached and cannot stand on its own, and it can be categorized into derivational and inflectional. In free morphemes, there's lexical morphemes, which are words that have meaning and carry content. For instance, some of the words found in the short film would be nouns such as name, school, verbs such as like, ask, adjectives such as nice, weird, adverbs such as back and now. As we can see right here, these are lexical morphemes because they already carry meaning and they can't be broken down into smaller units. In the short film, the characters often use root words that are more common to portray meaning directly and easily. For instance, they use school instead of institute. This shows that they try to use lexical morphemes that are more common and more familiarized with everyone, including the younger characters. For functional morphemes, they are words with grammatical functions in the sentences. In this short film, some of the examples would be conjunctions and, but, prepositions in, for, up, determiners, the, each, some, and pronouns he, his, they, and you. As we can see here, there are many functional morphemes that are being used in this short film because the characters can make sense of what others are trying to convey in a conversation with the help of functional morphemes. Functional morphemes help characters to make sense of what is being said because they point out the grammatical functions. Next, for bound morphemes, they are also known as affixes. Bound morphemes, when combined with a root word, or other bound morphemes, it creates a new word with new meanings. One of the bound morphemes would be derivational morphemes, which changes the meaning of words while retaining syntactic structure. For instance, prefixes such as re and pre can be added to a word to change its meaning. Suffixes ish and can be added to a word also to change its meaning. In this short film, there is no indication of derivational morphemes except teacher. However, it can be seen that the correct morpheme should be used to give sense to the sentence. If teach was used instead of teacher, it will change the meaning of the word and makes the listener confused. For inflectional morphemes, they indicate the grammatical functions of a word, but it does not change its meaning. For instance, some of the inflectional morphemes that modifies nouns would be s and es, and for possessive nouns, apostrophe s and s apostrophe. The examples would be friends and neighbors. For verbs, we can also add ed, ing, and en to words to change its grammatical function, such as happened and showing. For adjectives, we can add er and est as comparative and superlative adjectives, which indicates its functions in a sentence. The morphemes mostly found are nouns and verbs, as the characters often use them to explain about their current or past activities. This requires them to change the nouns, verbs, and adjectives to fit their grammatical, to make sure the sentence makes sense grammatically. Moving on, I will be discussing the syntax of this short film. Syntax refers to the possible arrangement of words to form sentences. The basic unit of syntax is sentence, which minimally consists of a main clause, at least a subject and a predicate. I will be diving into the sentence patterns and the sentence types found in the short film Haikal. For sentence patterns, a sentence can easily be divided as subject and predicate, or noun phrase and verb phrase. Sentences can be made up of phrases and clauses. Phrase is a group of connected words, but it is an incomplete sentence because it is either missing a subject or a verb. Clause is a complete sentence. It contains a subject, actor, and a verb, action. It can be independent or dependent. Furthermore, on the sentence patterns, it is commonly goes in the order of subject, verb, object, or subject, verb, complement. For instance, some of the examples found in Haikal would be these sentences. I like Hakami, which follows the SVO. S is the subject, which is I. V is the verb, which is like. O is the object, which is Hakami. Next, we have I know the fruit, which follows the same order. And Papa can send you to tuition, which follows the SVOC. S is the subject, which is Papa. V is the verb, which in this case is a verb phrase, can send. O is the object, which is you. And C is the complement of the object, which is the prepositional noun phrase, to tuition. Moving on, I'll be explaining the sentence types that are found in syntax. The first will be simple sentence. It has a subject, a verb, and an object. So it is also known as independent clause. Second would be the compound sentence. It is made up of two independent clauses or complete sentence. And these two clauses are connected with a coordinating conjunction. Some of the examples of coordinating conjunction goes by the acronym FANBOYS, which comprises of for, and, nor, but, or,
yet, and so. Third, we have complex sentence. Complex sentence is made up of independent clause and one or more dependent clause. So dependent clause cannot stand alone. Thus, for it to be connected, it has to begin with subordinating conjunction, such as because, although, which, who, and where. Last but not least, we have complex and compound sentence. Like its name, it is comprises of the complex and compound. It has two independent clauses and at least one dependent clause. So I have gathered some sentences according to the sentence type that are found in Haikal. For simple sentence, I found, do you understand? You can ask them tomorrow, and I didn't fight. They are simple sentences because they have a subject, a verb, and an object. For compound sentence, I found, me and the teachers feel that Haikal is having a bit of trouble making friends, probably because he's a bit different. Cikgu asked me to draw, but I want to play. Here we can see that there's clauses in blue. These clauses are connected with another clause with the conjunctions because and but. For complex sentences, I quote, my mommy always make for me, but with beef or chicken. The reason why Papa is telling you this story is because Papa and Mommy also took our time to learn about our culture. But with beef or chicken is a dependent clause that only makes sense when combined with an independent clause. Same goes to the second one, because Papa and Mommy also took our time to learn about our culture. For complex and compound sentences, my mother made it last night, but had extra, so I brought it today to eat. And Mommy taught Papa the simple things like using the chopsticks when we were eating, such as what we had discussed earlier. It has the independent clauses and dependent clauses. Here, my mother made it last night is a independent clause, but had extra is dependent clause, and so I brought it today to eat is independent clause. Same goes for Mommy taught Papa the simple things is independent clause, like using the chopsticks is dependent clause, and when we were eating is independent clause. My thoughts on the syntax of this short film. The characters tend to use compound and complex sentences as they are constantly reasoning and connecting information. The characters, they want their ideas to flow smoothly and more efficiently, so they tend to connect their sentences together with conjunctions. Most of the sentences are simple sentences as they are dialogues that were had with immediate references and context. The speakers and listeners, they are together face to face with the same context and the same reference, so it does not require them a lot of details to explain what they are trying to convey. There is usage of phrases too, such as the command, fill it up. Fill it up is a phrase and it is not a complete sentence, but it is still understood by the listeners because they are there with the speaker and knows what the speaker means. There are also sentences that serve the purpose as questions, exclamation, and declaration, as shown in the examples just now. Overall, based on the evaluation, the characters were able to use the correct morphology and syntax according to the principles. One of the reasons may be that the characters here are portrayed as native English speakers, so they are quite proficient in using the English language. Thus, there were no big issues in their usage of morphology and syntax. That is all from me. Thank you.